Hello everyone, Rich Bonaducci here with another cool drum thing to talk to you about. Sometimes I find drum parts and fix them up and make them into lamps and stuff like that. Other times I just have an idea about a drum set based on a product a company has offered. And this one right here is something I thought of a while ago. These are the LP Latin Percussion Raw Series cans, pretty much. They are steel drums that were made initially to be played standing up, kind of like street cans, I think they called them. And they're really cool, and they're heavy. I mean, they are solid, not flimsy trash can stuff that you can just compress. They are really strong, really solid, and they sound really cool. They are 14-inch, 16-inch, and 18-inch. And again, they were meant to be played standing up, kind of like floor toms that go higher. In fact, their floor tom legs are a little bit longer than standard legs, so you can get them higher up. I'm sure you've seen them around and seen them online, but I thought this might make for a cool steel drum set. TAMA a while ago came out with they have their S.L.P series, Sound Lab Project series, and they came out with different drums with different materials, obviously. And one of them was the big black steel snare, they called it, and they even had another one that was one was 8x14, one was 8x15. Really cool stuff, and they were pretty popular, so they decided to make a kit to go with it. And I believe it was a 3-piece kit, tom, bass drum, floor tom, and it was pretty expensive too, about $1,700 just for those 3 drums, not counting the snare. And again, they could only really be played as a drum set. They weren't made at all to be played standing up. So I thought this would be cool to have a kind of dual purpose kit. So I ended up getting the LP series, the 14, 16, and 18, and playing around with it standing up, obviously, but I wanted a way to play it as a drum kit too, and then switch it back if I wanted to. And if you've watched any of my videos, you also know I don't like to carry around a lot of extra stands. So I tried to figure out a way to have this stuff turn into a drum set, but also not have to carry around a ton of extra equipment to make it playable that way. LP also made a snare drum of sorts, which is basically a trash can lid with a drum head on it, and they put beads inside so it can sound like a rain drum, it can sound like a trash can drum. But and I got one of those too, and I thought that would be cool to have the trash can snare with the trash can set. And although I've seen people use it as a snare, I really didn't think it had enough meat to it as a main snare for a kit like this, because this thing is raw. This is a full-on rock kit. This is bottom. This is a really nasty rock drum set, and it has this cool industrial look. And I didn't change any of the heads. The heads that come with it are apparently from Remo. I called LP, and that's who makes them. And I think they have a slight ring on the inside, but they work pretty well. But I instead got a TAMA steel snare to go with it, just to stick not only with the whole thing of steel, but it needed to be meatier snare to go with these really meaty drums. So what I ended up doing is we'll start with the 16. The 16-inch floor tom was essentially unchanged. The only thing that I did was use different floor tom legs from another kit, because, as I mentioned before, the floor tom legs that come with it really make you able to elevate it very high in case you're playing it standing up. But if you drop it down to drum set height, they kind of stick up. They stick up on the sides, which wouldn't be so bad for the far side of the floor tom, but here it kind of got in the way. So I just used different floor tom legs, and that's all I really had to do. To make this floor tom do a little bit of double duty though, I bought this TAMA multi-clamp that attaches right to the rim and holds cymbal arms and lots of other things. It can hold cowbells and stuff. This is probably a bigger cymbal than they planned on using. I've seen mostly splash cymbals used for these arms. I don't think they planned on having this be used for this is an 18-inch medium thin Zildjian, but it works just fine. It hasn't ever given out, and I've hit it pretty hard. So I think if you just clamp them down properly, it'll hold even a large cymbal. So the floor tom, the 16-inch was essentially unchanged. The next one, the 14-inch floor tom that became the 14-inch tom of this kit, wasn't changed that much either, but I needed a way to have it angled toward me. And I was thinking of bending the legs and making them work in some way. Turns out that Gibraltar, I believe, had a product already made for just this purpose, not necessarily for the LP can series, but in case you wanted to make a floor tom into a tilted tom, that you could do it. As you'll see, the legs, the floor tom legs, are very long that allow you to get it high. And then the one leg actually has an angle bent into it and dual legs that stabilize the whole thing. So I tilted this thing just about as far as it could tilt, and it's angled at me pretty well. I think if this were a regular tom attached to, an Omni clamp or something, this is about the angle I would have it at. So it worked out pretty well. And that's the only change that I made. But I did add to it a little bit. As you can see, again, I don't like carrying around a lot of extra stands. So what I did is I added some, again, just little multi-clamps underneath the regular tom connection on the legs. And I was able to mount a little splash cymbal on this side and a 16-inch medium on this side. And I don't have to carry around a ton of extra stands to carry all these cymbals. So in addition to the memory lock that is right here, this is where the clamp comes in. And as you see, I often put the clamp underneath the memory lock. So you can undo this and take this leg away, and none of this stuff has to move. This essentially becomes a support for the memory lock into the clamp. So once you take this leg off, you don't have to move any of this really at all. And so again, when I put this in, here's the lock, and the clamp goes underneath the lock. So again, you can undo this and pull this leg out, and this whole thing just comes with. You'll have to you probably take this out, but at least you don't have to keep redoing this clamp every time you put your kit back together. And this kind of stabilized it a little bit too. There's some counterweight to it. It keeps it flat on the ground. Again, I played this quite a bit, pretty loud, pretty hard, and this thing has never wobbled too far or gone over. It hasn't leaned into my hi-hat or into my ride cymbal, even with being this far up and tilted back like that. So these legs are pretty stable. And again, you can get these through Gibraltar, and I got them used, so I didn't even have to pay full price for that. But I did keep the regular legs, obviously, because if you ever wanted to switch this back to be just standing height the way LP intended, you could do that pretty quickly just by changing out a leg. Now the 18-inch floor tom, standing floor tom, was the one that went through the most changes to make it into a bass drum. And again, I didn't want to change it that much because the whole point of this was to be able to switch it back to an upright if that's what the gig required, and then drop it back down if that's what the gig required. I didn't want to drill a bunch of holes and make a whole lot of changes. And it turns out Gibraltar to the rescue again, because I was planning on getting an extra set of legs and bending them somehow or whatever. But Gibraltar already made a little kit that you can put on larger floor toms like 18s, 16s, and 18s to make into a bass drum. So you'll also notice, to stick with the aesthetic of what LP had originally set up with the black lugs and things with the steel, which I thought looked really nice. Gibraltar's legs, I believe, already came in black, and some of the other legs didn't. So I just took them out back and spray painted them a little bit. Not even super well. You can see some of the steel still, or the chrome still showing through. And I thought it just kind of looked cool and industrial. I didn't do this one yet because I added it at the last minute. But if I was to sell this kit, which I'm thinking about, I would reapply the black and make sure it was just as nice and as deep as the black as originally came with the LP. Just needs another coat. I was just kind of doing it, see how it would look. And I like the look. I think it's a good idea. But the Gibraltar kit comes with these really super spiky legs. They are unnecessarily nasty. I think they look like bullets. And there is no rubber underneath them. I thought you might be able to unscrew that and have a rubber one just in case for someone's floor. But they only come this way. And it's fine. I ended up having carpet here. But if you end up using something like this, you want to bring a little carpet with you. This is going to put a major ding in anyone's floor. But what it ends up doing is you use 2 of your already supplied, already incorporated floor tom brackets for these legs. You don't have to drill anything or move anything at all. These legs fit right in there, and then you adjust the angle for how high you want your floor tom off the ground, depending on if it's a 16 or an 18 or a 20 or whatever it is. You know, you'll need to adjust this a little bit, and it's easy. It's as easy as just adjusting the clamp that's on your bass drum or floor tom bracket already. And it's as easy as adjusting the clamp that's already on your floor tom bracket already. Now, just for me, because I'm a little particular about this stuff, and I wanted something that would help me remember how to set this up from gig to gig, the 2 brackets that are on the bottom, that are the legs, I specifically did not color. They are chrome. So that helps me remember, oh, these are the ones on the bottom, you know, and these are the ones that are on the bottom for the legs, and this is the one on the top for the arm, because it's black. And people see this one anyway, they barely see these. But then I realized that I don't even have to, and this is great, I love stuff that's easy to break down and set up. You don't even have to take these legs off. These come with a memory clamp, the memory lock, that works really well. And all you have to do is loosen this, push this through a little bit so it unlocks, and fold this thing in. You just wrap it to the drum. And the legs just stay right there on the floor tom the way they do on modern bass drums anyway. So you don't have to take this thing out and re-put it back in. You just loosen it a little bit and fold it to the drum, and it stays there. The other thing that I did to make sure that I had a decent amount of sound but didn't have to mess with it too much is I have this Evans EQ pad in here. And the EQ pads are cool because they provide a bit of dampening on the head, but they also move a bit when you hit it. So when you hit the bass drum, it'll pull back a touch and allow it to breathe for a second and then sort of snap back and kill the overtone. So what I did was I undid 1 screw each from one of the clamps that are already there, and I just put little holes in the EQ pad and then put the screws through the holes. So this thing never falls out of the bass drum. I never have to readjust it. It's always right there, and I didn't have to attach any kind of Velcro or anything that you normally do to the inside of the shell, which wouldn't be as big of a deal on metal. On wood, you can sometimes, when you pull it off, you might pull some of the grain out, but there's no adjustment, and it's always right there, and it doesn't fall out, and that's that. Now, the top part is something that was really ingenious on Gibraltar's side of things. Just a great idea. You buy this arm. It's a very oddly shaped arm with a little rubber foot on it. And you just put it through the floor tom bracket that is already hooked into your floor tom. I didn't have to do anything. It's the one that's on the top when you have the other 2 on the bottom as legs. It's on the top. That's the way it is. And it comes with memory locks and all that. So you just put it through, and this allows the weight to rest on the bass drum itself, on the shell. And then you can clamp all kinds of stuff to it. So they had clamped in some of their literature, they had a tom clamp to it. They had it facing this way. They had a tom clamp to it because this was going to be on because this was going to be on legs. I really didn't need that, but I did want it to hold all this other stuff. So I just got a clamp and a little arm, and you can see it's holding my ride cymbal there, and I even have a crasher on top of the ride cymbal, which we'll talk about in a second. And so it held this ride cymbal basically right where I wanted it in like that 3-piece, 4-piece configuration, which is just sitting right there. And again, you don't have to carry around a whole other stand. And this thing, again, it's very meaty. These are pretty heavy drums. And there's no dent, there's no warping at all from this holding this weight, from this clamp resting on the shelf, from me hitting it. This is great. But then one other thing that I don't know if Gibraltar planned on, but because of this bar is this way and it stretches out this way parallel to your floor tom, I put another clamp on the edge of this right here. So I put a little rubber pad just to make sure if it rests against the shell while I'm playing, it doesn't make any sound or scratch. But it holds this cowbell right here. So this bass drum ends up holding all kinds of different things. Of course, it's the bass drum itself, it's the ride cymbal, it's a little effect and an LP cowbell. It's a Ridge Rider classic there. And it's all right here, no stands, which is great. Now, the only other thing was, because it's an 18-inch, it does have to get off the ground a little bit for your bass drum beater to hit in the middle. And I didn't want to have to go buy a whole other bass drum pedal, specially made or any of that kind of stuff, to have a shorter shaft or any of that. I wanted to be able to use the pedal that I'm used to, that I've already bought. Anything that I can reuse and or change without having to buy a bunch of stuff, I think is a good idea. So I went through a number of ideas about how to get that off the ground, and it turns out there is a product already made, which is just, it's so simple. I can't believe someone didn't come up with it before. It is just a sort of plastic mount that your bass drum pedal clamps to. It has a lip for it, even it has a very large lip, so basically any kind of bass drum pedal can clamp to it. But it has a rounded, cushioned support that the floor tom just rests in. It doesn't even attach to it, it just rests on it. And that's all it is. It's very light, it's very inexpensive. I got mine used. Again, if you can find it used, might as well. And it doesn't attach to the floor tom at all. You just rest the floor tom on it, in between the lugs, just past the rim, and that keeps it in place. The bass drum pedal itself clamps to it, and that's all you need to do. Now, there are a couple different ones out there. What's cool about this one, it's from Evans, is that it actually has, of course, this part to clamp to and this cushion part for the drum to sit on, but it has this little cradle that the whole thing sits in. So you just kind of pop it out of it. Again, this can stay hooked right to your pedal. And this has Velcro on the bottom, so it kind of just stays on your rug. So if you have a rug that you use all the time, this is a great way of marking where your bass drum is. So when you're ready, you just put it in there, and it's ready to go again. You just put your drum right back on it again. So if you were to use this as like your rock kit and you're taking it down and setting it up for gigs, you don't even really detach the pedal from this floor tom because it's not attached at all. You just lift it and it just comes off. It's just resting on it like your head on a pillow. But it just sits on there, and you don't even have to unclamp your bass drum pedal from that support block at all. You just leave it on it. And so the less setup and breakdown, the better as far as I'm concerned. So this thing is great as far as being able to bring a fair amount of stuff with you and have hardly any stands. I really couldn't get around not having a stand for a snare drum or the hi-hat, so I had to bring those. Like, I get that. But this floor tom is holding up a cymbal. This bass drum is holding up a cymbal, an effect, and some percussion. This floor tom is holding up two other cymbals. No other stands needed. And what I ended up doing over there on the hi-hat is attaching a little bit of arms on there to hold some more percussion and stuff like that. In fact, I think the only stand that isn't doing double duty, so to speak, is the snare drum stand. But when I was done, as you can see, I kind of spray painted all this stuff just to keep the, except for this, didn't get to it, but just to keep the look, and I ended up really liking it, and it's just a good idea. So in the end, once you're done with this, if you're going to another gig or something gets weird, even in between a set, it wouldn't take long during a break to just change out the legs on this and turn some of this stuff vertical and do a whole cool street can thing and then put it back. Half of it just comes off so easily. These memory locks that came with the Gibraltar setup here fit perfectly with these legs and keep everything in place. I haven't had to super clamp things down because the memory locks do their job. It's not only a memory, it's not only to remind you of how the setup goes, but it really does lock it in place. So I'll play this for you a second just so you can hear what it sounds, but keep in mind that I'm just using this, this camera mic to get the sound, so it's probably not going to sound great. And I'm not the best tuner on the planet. I'm sure you can make it sound better than me, but I think you'll get a pretty good idea of just how nasty these drums can be because they're open-ended steel. So anyway, here's the 14. Here's the 16. This thing kind of growls. I love it. Oh, and there's an 18-inch. And again, the only thing that's in there is that Evans EQ pad and a little flam pad on the front. There's a little bit of dampening on the top here just to keep it from ringing a bit because, again, they are steel and there are cymbals attached to it, cowbells and stuff, and then these two big cans right next to it, and I found that it was really echoing a lot. So I just put a little bit of dampening on it. But if you want it to echo more, of course, you could just move that pad out of there or take one of these little muffles off of here. Anyway, and so let's try this just a little bit. So, oh, by the way, in keeping with my, I don't like to carry around a lot of extra stuff. This is called a crasher, and it's just an extra percussive sound. It's just steel straps sitting on top of one another. Here you go. And instead of putting the other felt on the top and then clamp it down, I've actually glued a piece of felt to the bottom of this so that it becomes the felt for the cymbal. And then you just clamp it on here, and it becomes the cymbal top. But it's also just an extra sound, again, with no stand, and it's out of the way of the playing surface of the ride itself. So you got a full bell area here, and of course the whole shoulder part. And this is a real nasty cymbal here. This is a 21-inch custom mega bell ride from Zildjian. I normally have something a little bit more sedate for a ride cymbal, but for this kit, for this rock kit, I thought that would be great for this. So let's just hear it a little bit. Yeah, so this is fun. And of course, everything is right here, you know, cowbell and slap. I was also thinking of putting another one of these clamp, moving this over just a little bit, putting another clamp on this rim and having maybe a China boy there, a small China boy. But other than that, it's really great to have all these sounds at your disposal. I even forgot about what's sitting on the hi-hat here. And not have all those stands. So, this is it, the S.L.P street can drum set that I sort of made. They made the stuff, I put it together with some Gibraltar things and some other items I found online. I'm going to have descriptions of all this in the comments, so if you want to build one yourself, you can do that. But I'm also thinking, as it pains me, I'm thinking of selling this because, as you can see, I kind of have, and you can't even see the rest of this room, but I kind of have a lot of other drums going down. And what I end up doing is buying some things and fixing them up and changing them into something else and selling them. So this might be one of those things. And if you're interested, feel free to contact me through YouTube and we can talk about it. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hit them hard.